Think for a moment how much of your energy is wasted every single day worrying about what other people think of you. How much of your life is shaped not by your own choices, but by the fear of judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding? Imagine if you could free yourself from that invisible prison, if you could finally live without the weight of other people's opinions crushing your decisions. Today we begin a journey into one of the most liberating yet unsettling truths. Nobody really cares about you as much as you think they do. And this realization, rather than being depressing, can set you free in ways you never imagined. Stay with me until the end, because the final insight we will uncover together is the most powerful of all. Before we continue, I want to invite you to join this community of seekers, thinkers, and explorers. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction helps spread these reflections and keeps this space alive. And I promise you this: what we will explore today can change forever the way you see yourself, others, and the world. Let us begin by facing a truth that most people avoid. The spotlight you believe is on you most of the time simply does not exist. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect. Studies from Cornell University demonstrated that people drastically overestimate how much others notice their actions, mistakes, or appearance. You spill coffee on your shirt, you stumble on a word, you post something online and immediately regret it. You think the entire world is watching and judging, but the reality is most people are too caught up in their own struggles, fears, and insecurities to care about yours. Sartre understood this deeply in his work, Being and Nothingness. He describes the gaze of the other as a force that can trap us. When we imagine someone looking at us, suddenly we are reduced, objectified, defined not by our essence, but by their perception. That imagined gaze makes us prisoners of opinion. Yet Sartre also insisted that this trap is one we choose to enter. Because if existence truly precedes essence, then it is up to us to define ourselves regardless of the gaze. We are free, even when we fear freedom. Think about it. How many times have you silenced your own voice just to avoid embarrassment? How many times have you worn something, said something, or even pursued something, not because you truly wanted it, but because you thought it would please others? How much of your life is authentically yours? This is the uncomfortable question Sartre forces us to confront. Here lies the paradox. You think people are watching and judging, but at the same time you do not even exist in their minds as vividly as you believe. They are living in their own dramas. They are rehearsing their own insecurities. They are worried about how you see them. Everyone is locked inside their own perspective, their own consciousness. Nobody is really as focused on you as you think they are. This truth can be terrifying, because if nobody really cares, what then anchors you? If the validation of others does not matter, where do you find meaning? That is where freedom enters the stage. If you no longer live for the imagined gaze of others, you can finally live for your own choices, your own truth. You can choose projects that are meaningful to you, relationships that resonate with you, and a way of being that reflects your authentic self. But let us not rush. We need to sit with the discomfort first. Sartre famously said that existence precedes essence. What he meant is that we are not born with a fixed identity. We are thrown into existence, and then it is up to us to create ourselves. But here is the catch. Most people avoid this responsibility by hiding behind what Sartre called bad faith. They pretend that their choices are not really choices, that they are simply obeying society, tradition, or expectation. This allows them to avoid responsibility, to blame others for their unhappiness. And at the heart of this bad faith is the obsession with what others think. Ask yourself now, in what ways are you living in bad faith? In what areas of your life are you pretending that you are not free? Are you clinging to the idea that your life must be shaped by others, by their opinions, by their judgments? What would happen if you accepted that they simply do not care as much as you believe? Imagine the possibilities. Imagine walking into a room without that inner voice whispering, they are judging you. Imagine expressing your ideas without the fear of ridicule. Imagine pursuing your passion without the constant calculation of whether others will approve. This is not just a fantasy, it is the beginning of a radical shift in consciousness. Sartre believed that freedom was both a gift and a burden. The gift is that we are not defined by anyone else. The burden is that we cannot escape responsibility for who we become. To realize that nobody truly cares as much as we think is to remove the chains, but it is also to stand face to face with the weight of freedom. And here's the promise I make to you. As we continue this journey, you will discover that what seems like a harsh truth is in fact one of the greatest sources of strength and empowerment. In the next part, we will explore how to transform this realization into practical strategies for living more authentically, more courageously, and with deeper peace of mind. But before we get there, I want you to reflect deeply. What part of your life would you live differently if you truly believed nobody was watching? Think carefully about this. If nobody really cares about you as much as you imagine, then why do you keep placing their imagined opinions at the center of your life? This is the contradiction Sartre forces us to confront. We live as though others are the judges of our existence. Yet deep down, they are too consumed by their own anxieties to notice us. Understanding this is the first step toward liberation. But the second step is learning how to live differently once you accept it. The philosopher Epictetus, long before Sartre, taught that freedom comes when we stop trying to control what lies outside of us. The judgments of others belong to them, not to us. If someone mocks you, if someone misunderstands you, that reflection reveals more about them than it does about you. The Stoics knew that serenity could only be found in mastering what we can control: our thoughts, our actions, our choices. This teaching aligns perfectly with Sartre's demand for responsibility. Once you admit that others are not watching you as much as you think, you can redirect that energy inward and begin to sculpt the life you truly want. Consider this. How many dreams have died because of the fear of ridicule? How many books were never written? Businesses never started? Relationships never pursued simply because someone worried about looking foolish? If you let the gaze of others dictate your path, you are living in what Sartre called inauthentic existence. You become an actor playing a role, but not the author of your own script. Ask yourself now, are you the author of your life or just a character in someone else's play? When you make choices, do you feel they are rooted in your authentic desires, or are they strategies to win approval, to avoid criticism, to keep yourself hidden in the comfort of conformity? This is a painful reflection, but it is also necessary because only by recognizing the chains can you begin to break them. There is a fascinating psychological phenomenon connected to this. Research shows that most people overestimate the permanence of social judgment. You might believe that if you embarrass yourself in public, the memory will haunt you forever. Yet studies reveal that observers forget quickly. They are so caught up in their own lives that your mistakes fade almost instantly from their minds. The weight you carry for years is often a ghost that exists only in your imagination. Think of the freedom hidden in this truth. If others forget, then why do you punish yourself endlessly for minor flaws or awkward moments? Why let shame live rent-free in your soul when nobody else is keeping the record you imagine they are? When you realize this, you unlock a deeper kind of courage. The courage to try, to fail, and to rise again. Sartre believed that we are condemned to be free, but condemned does not mean doomed. It means that freedom is unavoidable. You cannot escape the responsibility of choice. Every time you refuse to act out of fear of what others might think, you are still making a choice of avoidance, a choice of denial, a choice of bad faith. The question becomes, do you want to use that freedom to hide, or do you want to use it to create? Imagine for a moment a life where your choices were not dictated by the invisible council of judges in your head. Imagine waking up each morning and asking not, "What will they think of me?" but "What will I create today? What will I pursue that matters to me?" The shift is subtle but profound. It is the difference between living as a prisoner and living as an artist of existence. But let us be clear, living authentically does not mean rejecting society or refusing all relationships. Sartre himself acknowledged that the other is part of our existence. We cannot erase the gaze completely, nor should we. Relationships, communities, and connections give meaning and depth to our lives. The problem arises only when we surrender our freedom to the gaze. When we define ourselves only through the imagined judgments of others. Authentic living means balancing the presence of the other with the responsibility of self-creation. So here is a practical exercise to reflect on the next time you feel paralyzed by fear of what someone will think. Pause and ask yourself this question. What if they don't care at all? Play the scenario out. Imagine your mistake or your bold decision. Then imagine how quickly it will fade from the minds of others. Notice how the weight shifts. Notice how much energy is freed when you stop obsessing over the illusion of constant judgment. Let me share with you something Viktor Frankl once wrote. A man who endured suffering few of us could ever imagine. He said that the ultimate freedom is the ability to choose one's attitude in any circumstance. If this is true, even in the darkest of conditions, then it is certainly true in the small stage of everyday life. If nobody is paying as much attention as you think, then you are free to choose, free to act, free to live. Now let me ask you directly, what dream have you buried because you feared what others might say? What passion have you silenced because you imagined disapproval? Write it in the comments, share it, bring it to the light. This act alone can be the first step in reclaiming your freedom. And remember this, life is short, and every moment you spend worrying about imaginary judgments is a moment stolen from your true self. To live authentically is to refuse that theft. In the next part, we will explore the deeper consequences of this realization. Moving beyond freedom into the question of meaning itself. Because once you accept that nobody really cares about you as much as you think, you are left with the task of asking, then why am I here? What am I living for? That, as Sartre and many thinkers remind us, is the real question, and the answer can change everything. Think about this. If nobody cares as much as you believe, then the stage is clear. You stand at the center of your own existence. And the question that now burns is not, what do they think of me? But what will I make of my freedom? This is the terrifying and exhilarating reality Sartre placed before us. Freedom without meaning can feel like a void, but freedom embraced with responsibility becomes the canvas upon which you paint your life. Many people fear this void. They prefer to live under the illusion of external judgment because it gives them a sense of direction. If society defines you, if others dictate your role, then you can avoid the heavy burden of deciding for yourself. This is why Sartre accused so many of living in bad faith. They cling to roles, identities, and expectations, not because they reflect who they are, but because it saves them from confronting the dizzying openness of freedom. But the truth is this: when you stop worrying about what others think, you are forced to face the raw materials of your existence. What do you value? What do you want? Who do you wish to become? These questions are not comfortable, but they are the beginning of authenticity. Let us consider meaning. Sartre rejected the idea of a preordained purpose. He argued that life has no inherent meaning until we create it. For many, this sounds bleak, but pause for a moment. Is it not far more empowering to know that you are not bound by a script written before you were born? You are not trapped in a role you did not choose. You are free to invent, to shape, to decide. This is not despair. It is liberation. The psychologist Rollo May, influenced by existential thought, explained that anxiety is the price of freedom. When we no longer lean on external authorities to define us, we feel the trembling of uncertainty. Yet, it is precisely this trembling that signals growth. Imagine climbing a mountain. Your legs shake, your breath shortens, but each step upward expands your view. In the same way, the anxiety of freedom is the doorway to higher vision. Now let us connect this to our modern world. Never before in history have we been so aware of the opinions of others. Social media amplifies the gaze. Every post, every picture, every comment seems like an audition for approval. But pause and reflect. How often do you scroll through endless feeds, noticing others for a split second before moving on? This is exactly how others perceive you. Fleeting, temporary, forgotten as quickly as they appeared. The supposed stage of judgment is little more than a blur of distracted glances. Knowing this, why give so much weight to something so fragile? Instead of wasting your freedom on the endless chase for validation, what if you invested it in creation? Think of the artists, philosophers, and innovators who left their mark on the world. Do you believe they were free of criticism? Of course not. Sartre himself was mocked, resisted, misunderstood. Yet he did not bend his existence to silence those voices. He chose instead to write, to create, to express. And in doing so, he shaped the intellectual landscape of an entire century. The same principle applies to you, even if on a smaller scale. Your life is your project. Every day you are writing it, shaping it, creating it. The fear of judgment steals the pen from your hand. But when you remember that nobody is truly keeping score, the pen returns to you. What story do you wish to tell? Let me give you an example. Imagine you walk into a room full of strangers. You are nervous. Your mind races. What are they thinking about me? Do I look foolish? Do I belong here? But shift your perspective for a moment. Each of those people is having the same inner dialogue about themselves. They are not consumed with you. They are consumed with their own self-consciousness. The irony is that everyone is trapped in their own fear of being observed. Yet nobody is really doing the observing. The prison walls exist only in the mind. So let me ask you, if those walls are imaginary, why not walk through them? Why not live boldly, unapologetically, authentically? Why not pursue what sets your soul on fire, knowing that the gaze you fear is nothing more than a reflection of your own imagination? Viktor Frankl, whose philosophy was shaped in the horror of concentration camps, wrote that meaning is not found in comfort, but in responsibility. We create meaning by choosing how we respond to the challenges before us. Even suffering can become meaningful when we approach it with courage and purpose. If this is true in the darkest of conditions, then surely it is true in the ordinary struggles of our daily lives. And so here is the challenge. Take one step this week that expresses your authentic self, even if it feels risky. Speak the truth you have been holding back. Begin the project you have delayed. Share your passion without filtering it through the imagined opinions of others. Then notice what happens. You will likely discover that the storm of judgment you feared never arrives. The audience you thought was watching is silent. And in that silence, you will hear something else. Your own voice, steady and clear. But we are not done yet. There is still a deeper truth, the one I promised from the very beginning, the truth more powerful than all the others. It is not only that nobody cares as much as you think, it is that this very absence of judgment can open the door to a radical kind of love and connection. Because when you no longer need others to define you, you are finally free to meet them as they are, without fear, without masks. And that is where we are headed. In the final part, we will uncover how this realization leads not just to freedom, but to a new understanding of connection, meaning, and perhaps the deepest truth Sartre hinted at, but never fully resolved. Stay with me until the end, because the last revelation is the one that can truly transform the way you see yourself in the world. So, here we are. We began with a simple but unsettling truth. Nobody cares about you as much as you think. We explored the weight of imagined judgment, the illusion of the spotlight, and the freedom that emerges when we stop living as prisoners of the gaze. We confronted the anxiety of responsibility, the challenge of creating meaning, and the courage required to live authentically. But now we must go further into the most powerful insight of all, the one I promised from the very beginning. What if the very fact that nobody is watching you as closely as you believe is not a curse, but a blessing? What if this realization could lead not only to freedom, but also to a new kind of connection and love, one that is deeper, truer, and free of illusions? Think about it. If you are no longer enslaved to the imaginary judgments of others, then you no longer need to perform. You no longer need to wear masks or play roles. You can meet others not as actors on a stage competing for approval, but as human beings standing side by side in the shared mystery of existence. Sartre, though often seen as a philosopher of despair, hinted at this possibility. While he described freedom as a burden, he also left space for the idea that in our freedom, we can choose solidarity. We can choose connection. We can choose to embrace the other not as a judge, but as a companion. When you release the obsession with how you are seen, something profound happens. You begin to see others, really see them, not as judges, not as mirrors reflecting your insecurities, but as individuals carrying their own struggles, fears, and hopes. You begin to understand that just as nobody is watching you as closely as you believe, they too feel unseen, unheard, unnoticed. And from this recognition, compassion arises. This is the deeper truth. The realization that nobody cares liberates you from fear, but it also awakens your capacity to care. Because when you stop demanding that others validate you, you free yourself to offer genuine presence, attention, and love. You stop asking, "What do they think of me?" and start asking, "Who are they really? What are they carrying? How can I meet them without masks, without pretense?" The philosopher Martin Buber spoke of this in his work, I and Thou. He described two ways of relating. One is superficial, transactional, where others are treated as objects, things to be judged, used, or feared. The other is authentic encounter, where we meet the other as a Thou, a presence as real as ourselves. This, Buber said, is where the sacred enters. It is in the space between two authentic beings that something greater is revealed. Imagine living this way. Imagine walking into a conversation, not worried about how you appear, but fully attentive to the person before you. Imagine loving without the hunger for approval, listening without the filter of insecurity, connecting without the shadow of performance. This is where freedom blossoms into compassion, where self-liberation transforms into shared humanity, sereniness. And here's the paradox. When you stop caring so much about what others think of you, you actually become more attractive, more magnetic, more real. People are drawn to authenticity because it is so rare. In a world where everyone is performing, the one who dares to be genuine becomes a light in the darkness. And that light does not shine by seeking attention. It shines by simply being. Now I want to leave you with a final reflection. One day your life will end. The opinions you feared, the judgments you imagined, the spotlight you thought was upon you, none of it will matter. What will matter is whether you lived authentically, whether you created meaning, whether you loved deeply, whether you left behind a trace of truth in a world often clouded by illusions. Sartre once wrote that freedom is what you do with what has been done to you. You cannot control the fact that existence is fragile, that life is uncertain, that others may misunderstand you. But you can control what you make of that truth. You can live hiding, or you can live creating. You can exist in fear, or you can exist in freedom. You can cling to masks, or you can stand unmasked, daring to be seen for who you truly are, even if most of the time nobody's really watching. And maybe, just maybe, that is the point. Life is not a performance for others. It is a creation for yourself and a gift you can offer to those who cross your path. The freedom you feared becomes the soil of authenticity. The loneliness you dreaded becomes the ground of compassion. The realization that nobody cares about you as much as you think becomes the doorway to the deepest truth. That in your freedom, you have the power to care for yourself, for others, and for life itself. So as we close this journey, I invite you to take this with you. Stop worrying so much about nothing. Stop living in the prison of imaginary judgment. Take back the pen and write your own story. Live authentically, love deeply, create boldly. Because in the end, the only true failure is to have existed without ever really living. And now I turn the question back to you. What will you do with your freedom? How will you live knowing that the gaze you feared was never really there? Share your reflection below and let us continue this dialogue together. Remember, nobody is watching as closely as you believe. So live not for their gaze, but for your truth. And in that truth, you may discover the most powerful freedom of all. Thanks for looking.